Mechanical energy conservation is just one formula, but most students overcomplicate it. Teachers often give 3 different expressions involving delta E or kinetic energy shifts, leaving students unable to write the formula correctly. With Songjae, forget all that. Just one clear formula and method. The logic is simple and foolproof. For this episode, all high school students and parents must use the essential set of mechanical energy conservation practice problems that I, Songjae, have compiled. Watch it repeatedly, and if you need the materials, just contact me to download and print them. I'll send you everything. So today, let's learn together. One of the most important concepts in high school mechanics is the conservation of mechanical energy. So what is the conservation of mechanical energy? It's a new way of solving problems using energy methods. Compared to the kinematics we discussed before, when we use energy methods to solve problems, we don't need to worry about the object's motion process in between. We can directly identify its initial and final states, and from there, solve for the physical quantities we need, such as its speed, displacement, and so on. That's why mastering the conservation of mechanical energy and learning how to solve problems using energy methods is extremely important. First, let's take a look at the definition of mechanical energy conservation. The definition in our textbook is very clear and simple. Mechanical energy conservation means that in a system where only gravity or elastic force does work, kinetic energy and potential energy can be converted into each other, while the total mechanical energy remains unchanged. First, we need to clarify a concept. Conservation of mechanical energy. What is mechanical energy? Mechanical energy is actually the sum of an object's kinetic energy and its potential energy. Kinetic energy is usually denoted as K, and potential energy is generally represented as P. We've already learned about kinetic energy. It's related to the object's speed. It's equal to 1/2 mv squared, right? And as for potential energy, it refers to things like gravitational potential energy and elastic potential energy. So mechanical energy is simply the sum of kinetic energy and potential energy. Adding the two together gives you the total mechanical energy. That's the concept of mechanical energy. Now, let's look at the definition of conservation of mechanical energy and see which important points we need to pay attention to. The first point is the condition for the conservation of mechanical energy, which is only when mechanical energy is conserved only when work is done by gravity or elastic force alone. Why is it that mechanical energy is conserved only when work is done by gravity or elastic force? It's because gravity and elastic force have a very important characteristic when doing work. That is, the work done by gravity or elastic force does not depend on the path taken, or in other words, it is unrelated to the trajectory of the object's motion. So what is it related to? It is related to the initial and final positions of the object. In other words, the initial and final positions determine the amount of work done, and it has nothing to do with the object's path of motion. Therefore, forces like gravity and elastic force are called conservative forces. A conservative force is a force whose work does not depend on the path taken by the object, but only on its initial and final positions. Such forces are called conservative forces. For example, gravity, the elastic force of a spring, the electric force that we will learn about later, and the universal gravitation we studied before. All of these are conservative forces. The work they do is unrelated to the object's trajectory and depends only on its initial and final positions. Of course, there are conservative forces. There are also non-conservative forces, which are the opposite of conservative forces. We know that for non-conservative forces, the work they do is related to the path taken. For example, friction and air resistance are both related to the object's trajectory. This is the concept of conservative and non-conservative forces. Then, under the condition that mechanical energy is conserved, the kinetic energy and potential energy within the system can be converted into each other. They transform into one another. However, when you add kinetic energy and potential energy together, their total amount remains unchanged. This is what we refer to as the expression of the conservation of mechanical energy. All right, after we've clarified the definition of the conservation of mechanical energy, the next very important point is determining the condition for the conservation of mechanical energy. That is, how do we judge whether the mechanical energy of an object or a system of objects is conserved? Well, we can use the following methods to make this determination. The first method is to judge based on the work done, because as we mentioned in the definition, mechanical energy is conserved only when the work is done by gravity or elastic force. So the first point is that we can determine this by looking at the forces acting within the system and the work done by those forces. There are 3 different scenarios for this determination. The first scenario is when the system is only subjected to gravity or elastic force. If a system is only affected by these 2 forces, then naturally only these 2 forces can do work, so its mechanical energy is definitely conserved. For example, we've previously studied projectile motion, right? It is only subjected to gravity, just the force of gravity. Then there's also free fall. In free fall, the only force acting is gravity as well. And we've also talked about a spring. A mass spring system, or oscillator, refers to a vibrating system under the action of the spring's restoring force. We call this a spring oscillator. These kinds of physical models are all subject to either gravity or the restoring force of a spring. Therefore, its mechanical energy is conserved. This is the first scenario. We determine this by analyzing the forces acting on the object or by considering the work done. The second scenario is when the object is subjected to other forces, but these other forces do not do any work. In other words, the object is not only affected by gravity or elastic force, There are also other forces acting on it, but these other forces do not do any work. For example, in circular motion, such as the uniform circular motion we studied, or the idealized massless string model we have learned about. When an object is undergoing circular motion, it is subject to its own weight, and at the same time, it is also subject to the tension T from the string, right? Let's see if it satisfies our second condition. It is subject to other forces, such as the tension from the string. However, notice that during the object's motion, the tension from the string does no work because the tension is always directed toward the center of the circle, and it is perpendicular to the direction of velocity. It is perpendicular, so it does no work, which means we can also use the conservation of mechanical energy here. Now, let's look at another example. For instance, consider a smooth inclined plane, a model where an object slides down from the top of a smooth surface. During the sliding process, we know the object is subject to gravity, and at the same time, the surface provides a normal force to support it. The normal force, Fn, right? It also experiences other forces, including this normal force Fn. However, this Fn also does no work, right? So, since Fn does no work and only gravity does work, it also satisfies the condition for the conservation of mechanical energy. So, we can write down this specific example here, where other external forces are clearly present, but they actually do no work at all. For instance, in the case of uniform circular motion, consider the tension in the string, right? The classic string model. The second example is a smooth surface. These are all situations where the object is subjected to other forces, but those forces do no work. In such cases, we can use the conservation of mechanical energy. The third criterion is when other forces do work, meaning there are other forces doing work within the system, but the algebraic sum of the work done by these forces is zero. That is, the total work done by other forces adds up to zero. In this situation, we can also use the conservation of mechanical energy. Let me give you another example. For example, in a smooth fixed pulley system like this, take a look at our system. It is frictionless. Friction is not considered. M1 and M2, these two objects, are connected by a rope through a fixed pulley. During their motion, besides being affected by their own weight, M1 and M2 are also each subjected to a tension force T from the rope. With the tension force T acting on them, isn't this a case where other forces are at play? Moreover, during their motion, for example, if we release them from rest, and if M1 is greater than M2, then M1 will move downward and M2 will move upward with an upward velocity ev, right? Meanwhile, M1 will have a downward velocity. All right, so we can see that during their motion, the tension T on M2 does positive work, while the tension on M1 does negative work. This is because M1 is moving downward, so its displacement is downward. However, in this process, the total work done by the tension T on both M1 and M2 adds up to zero. That is, W1 plus W2 equals zero. Why is it zero? Because of their T. The magnitudes are the same, and the displacements of M1 and M2 are also the same, but the rope does positive work on M2 and negative work on M1. When you add W1 and W2 together, their magnitudes are equal, but one is positive and the other is negative. So when you add them up, the result is zero. So this is our third scenario. There are other forces doing work, but the algebraic sum of their work is zero, which also means mechanical energy is conserved. This is also a condition that can satisfy the conservation of mechanical energy. Okay, so this is the first method for determining whether mechanical energy is conserved. We judge based on the forces acting on the object and the work they do. Besides this method, there is a second, quite important method. Instead of analyzing the forces or the work in detail, we simply look at the energy transformation process during the object's motion. If, within a system, there is only conversion between kinetic energy and potential energy, and there is no other energy input or loss, then mechanical energy is also conserved. Let's go back to the example of the fixed pulley we just discussed. In this system, there are other forces doing work, such as the tension in the string. Many students can't figure out that the work done by the tension on these two objects when added together for both M1 and M2 actually sums to zero. The total work done by the tension on both objects adds up to zero. So using our previous method, we can't really make a determination. In fact, we can also use the method of energy transformation to analyze it. Take a look at this fixed pulley system. As the objects move, what kind of energy transformation is taking place? When M1 descends and M2 rises, what's actually happening is that the potential energy of M1 and M2 is being converted into their kinetic energy. There is no other energy input or loss, right? There is also no external force doing work on them. And within the system, their energy is not being converted into other forms of energy loss, such as heat generated by friction. So in this kind of system, we can also use the method of energy transformation to determine that mechanical energy is conserved. When facing a problem, first check if mechanical energy is conserved. To do this, look at work done or energy transformation for an accurate result. Now that we've discussed these conditions, the key is the formula. Many teachers note that mechanical energy conservation can be expressed in three different forms. The first form is that the mechanical energy of an object in its initial state equals the sum of its potential energy and kinetic energy in that initial state, that is, E1 equals P1 plus K1. This represents the potential energy in its initial state, plus the initial kinetic energy, and then it equals the potential energy in its final state, which we call EP2, plus the kinetic energy in its final state. In other words, the total amount of its mechanical energy remains unchanged. This is also a formula expressed in our textbook. By using the fact that the total mechanical energy of an object remains constant, we can set up our equations. Of course, some teachers might say, how else can we set it up? We can also use delta E. It equals delta E minus, that is, the increase in mechanical energy within an object or system is equal to its decrease in mechanical energy. This is another way to set up our equation for the conservation of mechanical energy. Then, the third method is to use the change in kinetic energy within an object or system to set up the equation. In a system where mechanical energy is conserved, the change in kinetic energy is equal to the change in potential energy. For example, the increase in kinetic energy is equal to the decrease in potential energy. Decrease by expressing the conversion between kinetic energy and potential energy. These are the three expressions for the conservation of mechanical energy that many people talk about. But let me tell you, you only need to remember the first one. You don't need the other two at all. Why? Because for the second one, where the increase in mechanical energy within an object or system equals its decrease in mechanical energy, we can understand or solve problems using the principle of energy conservation. Because the increase in energy within an object or system equals the decrease in energy, this is actually the concept of energy conservation. And energy conservation is even more universal than the conservation of mechanical energy. Energy conservation applies to all situations, whereas the conservation of mechanical energy has certain restrictions. It can only be used when only gravity or elastic force is doing work. That's why using energy conservation is more universally applicable. And it's also less prone to errors. So if you're writing the second equation, you can just use the law of energy conservation directly. Then for the third part, where the change in kinetic energy of an object equals the change in potential energy, we can simply use the work energy theorem or its related concepts to set up the equation. Of course, you can also use the law of energy conservation for this. You can also use the law of energy conservation because energy conservation is more universal. Using these two methods to set up the equations makes it easier to understand, and it's less prone to mistakes compared to using the conservation of momentum. So when learning about the conservation of mechanical energy, as long as you know how to write the first equation, that's enough. Let me give you an example. How do we use the first formula to write an expression for the conservation of mechanical energy? For instance, let's consider a simple pendulum model. In the early morning, a small object, let's call it little m, is fixed to the end of a string. At the beginning, the string is in a horizontal position and the object starts from rest with an initial velocity of 0. Then we release it and we want to find out, when the string swings down to its lowest point, what is the speed v of the object at that lowest point? The length of the string is L. First, let's look at this example. It satisfies the condition for the conservation of mechanical energy, so we can use the formula for mechanical energy conservation to set up the equation and solve the problem. According to the formula we just discussed, the conservation of mechanical energy means that for an object, in the initial state, its mechanical energy is equal to its mechanical energy in the final state. So I just need to write out the mechanical energy in the initial state and the final state and set up an equation. First, when we calculate gravitational potential energy, we need to choose a reference plane. We'll take the lowest point, the plane at the lowest point, as the zero potential energy reference. So in the initial state, the gravitational potential energy of the object, EP1, is equal to mg times L, right? The gravitational force multiplied by its height above our reference plane is L. And what about its initial kinetic energy? K1 is equal to 0, so its kinetic energy is also 0. As you can see, by adding the potential energy and kinetic energy, we've written out its mechanical energy in the initial state. So we've written out the left side of the equation. Now on the right side, that's its final state. The final state is when it reaches the lowest point. At the lowest point, its mechanical energy, well, at the lowest point, its potential energy, its gravitational potential energy is 0, right? It's on our 0 potential energy reference plane. Then its kinetic energy is equal to 1/2 mv squared, where v is what we're trying to find. So after we've set up this mechanical energy conservation equation, v equals the square root of 2gl. All right, in this simple example, you can see that by using the first formula for mechanical energy conservation that we discussed, we can easily write out its expression and then solve for the velocity we need. The approach and method are both very clear. Just write out the mechanical energy for the initial state, then for the final state, and set the two equal to each other. The only thing to pay attention to is that when calculating gravitational potential energy, you must first choose a 0 potential energy reference plane. Choosing an appropriate 0 potential energy reference plane can simplify some of our calculations. So this is a summary of the problem-solving approach for mechanical energy conservation. As long as you remember the formula I taught you, isn't the thought process especially clear and much less prone to mistakes? In the next video, I will walk you through an example problem step by step, showing you exactly how to apply the method we discussed today to your own problem solving.